Thank you. Well, this will be an atypical seminar because I'm not going to talk much about SUGCON 9. I'm probably going to talk about SUGCON 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. My name is Brian. I've been working with Sitecore for about 15 years. And in that time, I have been working with several Sitecore solutions, but I've probably only started or been a lead architect on about 10 of those. And that's because many of the solutions that I've made is very long lasting. So I've had an experience with the projects that have been running for maybe 10 years. So this is one of the examples. This is a Sitecore solution made 15 years ago, and it was decommissioned in March this year. It's a censoring system for every movie and advert and TV show in Denmark that needs to be censored. So the how you assign censored people to censor the movies have been going through this website for 15 years, about 1 million of those. It was built in Sitecore 4 with XSLTs and a custom access database, accessing data, and a Visual Basic integration to Oracle, because that's what we had at that time, 15 years ago. There's another system that is still running, and we started it 12 years ago in Sitecore 6 something. And at that time, we used a very exotic .NET Lucene search engine. Now we all know the Lucene.NET search engine, but at that time, that was very exotic to work with. This one is also running. It is a site that has been running for 12 years straight, also using the very modern .NET Lucene index search, using XSLT for presentation. It was a website that cost about 300,000 euros to develop, and has been running for 12 years now. It is currently being replaced by a 5 million euro Umbraco solution. Because as we all know, Umbraco is cheaper than Sitecore because this license is free. But if you look at the total cost of ownership for the 300,000 euro Sitecore solution running for 12 years straight, I think that Sitecore will win. But this is the case story of today. It's a website in Danish called Mine Tilbud, my office, you could call it in English. Started about 5 years ago, and we started working on Sitecore 6.4, and it has been continuously upgraded till Sitecore 9, and we're currently upgrading the website to Sitecore 9. In Denmark, we get these physical adverts in our mailbox, like this, every week, and we get about 35 of these. These are offers from all the stores in Denmark. And people could, at one time, only get all these adverts in their mailbox, in their physical mailbox. But a government rule mandated that you could put a sticker on your mailbox stating that you would have no adverts at all. So you could choose between having every advert in your mailbox or no adverts at all. And this website was then created to gap the bridge between having no adverts or every adverts, because in this site, you can choose which adverts you would like in your physical mailbox. We have about 2.4 million households in Denmark, so we knew that that would be the absolute maximum of users having in the system. But we also knew from experience that there's still a lot of people, especially maybe my parents' generation, that get all the adverts because they actually like reading the adverts in paper. And we also knew that was a large group of people, maybe even the young generation, that have no adverts at all because they're not used to reading adverts in paper. So we expected to have somewhere about 500,000 users in the system. So that's why we, in Sitecore 6.4, started implementing the login process using the standard .NET membership provider, because it exists in Sitecore, it's there, it's very easy to work with. But of course, as time grew, the number of users also grew. They purchased a company that makes apps for reading adverts online. So you can take your app and then you can read the adverts online on your mobile phone. You can also read them on the website, which meant that people can also log into the system using the app or using the website, not because they want to manage how many of these physical papers they get, but because they want to log into this one so they can save their favorites, making different choices in that app. So over the course of 5 years, the .NET user, the membership database grew from having no users to just about 1 million users in its cycle. And that creates some challenges. The .NET membership provider was probably created to hold about 30,000 users. Some people even say that the .NET membership database was created as a demonstration on how to create a login provider. I must say that logging into Sitecore using the membership provider is not an issue. Once you get a hold of a user, the performance is the same as if you have 1 user, if you have 1 million users, if you have 2 million users. But the problem is that, for example, the membership database is placed inside the core database, which means that if you want to upgrade Sitecore from one version to another version, you cannot have 2 Sitecores pointing to the same database, which makes upgrades challenging because you have to take your site down for a period of time until you have the new version that you can take up again. There's an issue in Sitecore that if you search for an email address, it's very, very slow. Having 500,000 users can take about 60 seconds to search for a user by username, or excuse me, by email address. And also, if you have custom properties in your .NET membership database, these custom properties are not searchable because they are stored in one big field in the membership database. So if you add, like we have a custom ID, we have an address, the physical address. We have the first name and last name. And we would like to search for users on those properties. It's simply not possible using the .NET membership database. So why would you search for those? The reason that we search for those is that we have a customer center that helps users if they forgot their password, if they cannot figure out how to reset their password or change their physical address. They call in and we help them. So we need to be able to search by their address, their email, whatever information they give us so we can help them. So why even having the .NET membership database inside the Sitecore core database? Well, back in Sitecore 4, the user login was a system that Sitecore made themselves. And in Sitecore 4, we had a core database, a master database, and a web database. In Sitecore 5, when that was released, Sitecore changed the database structure to have 7 databases. And everybody said, oh no, that's way too difficult to configure. We cannot figure out how to set up 7 databases. It's way too complicated. So in Sitecore 6, they went back to the 3 databases. So we had a core database, a master database, and a web database. And the reason why the membership database ended up in the core database is that even if you have a content management and content delivery server, you need access to the core database. So they figured that that would be a good place for the membership database provider. But there's no reason why the databases are inside there because they're not connected to Sitecore in any way. So if we want to upgrade Sitecore and we don't want to have any downtime, we cannot point to the same core database because that database would be upgraded for one Sitecore version and not upgraded for a different Sitecore version. So we need to separate the core database, or we need to separate the .NET membership database from the core database. And that's very easy. You just take a copy of the core database. You rename this copy to something user-like, like users, for example. You create a new connection string in your connection string.config. And then in the web config, you simply point to that database in your configuration. So in this example, the connection string name for the providers and the role manager and the profile is just pointing to the user's database. And by that, I have separated my core database and my user database. And now I can have 2 separate Sitecore instances pointing to the same membership provider. So the next challenge is that if you use the Sitecore User Manager, searching for users are very, very slow. It starts becoming slow about 100,000 users. Then it becomes, then you can feel that when you type in an email address and before it pops up, it takes a long time. If you have 250,000 users, it's almost impossible because you have to wait maybe a minute from typing in the email address to the actual user pops up on the screen. And that's because in some versions of Sitecore forgot to add some indexes to the membership database. But back in 2014, the Sitecore support, they sent me these scripts, and all they do is that they add 2 new indexes and they modify 2 stored procedures. So searching will be very fast. Now, they kind of tended to appear in Sitecore and then disappear in the next version, and then reappear in a version. So if you have a Sitecore, these scripts might be inside your version of Sitecore, and they might not. But it's not a problem to try and install them. You don't ruin anything by overriding the stored procedures or adding the indexes if they are already there. So it's just trying. And obviously, you have taken a backup of your database before you try, right? So you don't really need to know how they work, but here they are. What was missing was the Sitecore didn't have an index on the lower email and user ID, and they didn't have an index on the lower username and email. And then the way to getting all users wasn't using these indexes. And if you wanted to get user by email, it didn't use these indexes. So the scripts just modifies these. And all you can do is that you can take them from this website and just try to put them into your database. And as you can see, after I added those indexes, it is painful and slow, but it's possible to search for users from the user manager. It takes about 4 seconds from a type to something appears on screen, and that's all with about 1 million users in the user database. So until now, I have improved the search, and I've improved my possibilities of upgrading with no code at all. But for the next project, I need to write some code. And here we have the classic Sitecore challenge. Sitecore allows you to do anything you like. So should I modify Sitecore or should I extend Sitecore? Modifying would mean that I would replace or inherit from the implementation of the Sitecore membership provider. What I want to do now is that I would like to be able to search in my custom properties. I would like to be able to search in my first name and my last name, my physical address, a zip code. And I would like to do that because I need to make a website for the for customer support, so they can help people when they call in and say, I don't know how to change my physical address. Well, what is your address? And then you can type in the address, find the users. So I could modify the Sitecore membership provider. Or I could extend the Sitecore users the way that works. Extending the, modifying the Sitecore membership provider tends to bring me closer to my goal and tends to be the correct solution. But it also tends to have, it requires more work, and it seems to be more difficult to upgrade Sitecore. If I just extend the way Sitecore works, or extend the usage of Sitecore, it requires less work, and it tends to be easier to maintain. It's not always that, but it just tends to be from my experience. I also know that in Sitecore 9.2, the membership provider will be replaced with something else. So I'm not interested in making a huge proprietary system just for searching my users. I want to make as little as code as possible, because in SUGCON 9.2, if I upgrade, I have to change it anyway. So Sitecore can store custom properties in a profile, and they can even show it on screen. You can add you can configure Sitecore so it shows you what custom properties you have on your user profile. And I can see the first name, last name, I can see the address, I can see the zip code and other information. But as I told you, the .NET membership provider, it stores the custom properties in one big field in some strange format. So you cannot search for them. You cannot make a select query into Sitecore or into the .NET membership databases and get the information that you want. So what I would like to do is I would like to create an index of users. And I would like to create it in Solr, because in this project, Solr was already there. So it would be obvious to create a Solr index where I have all the users indexed, and I can make a very, very quick search for those properties. Since Sitecore 7-something, Sitecore created some events that is fired when you do something with a user. They made this user created, or user deleted, user updated event, users added and users removed events. And for those events, I can attach code and tell the system what I want to do when that happens. There's one little issue, that is that the user created event is not actually fired by Sitecore when you call the membership.createUser. So I have to create a little bit of code myself to ensure that that event is being thrown. They will throw the user created event if you create a user from within Sitecore. But if you call the membership.createUser, this is when it's not fired. So this is a very simple solution, and raising an event is very, very simple in Sitecore. Just say event.raiseEvent, and which event you want to raise, that event will be raised immediately. So let's see how this works. Setting up a Solr core is done inside Solr, and then I set up a configuration in Sitecore. This configuration was just copied from, I think, the master configuration, and what we changed to have our own index in Solr is that we don't have a strategy. So the strategy is the way Sitecore figures out how to update the index, but since I'm the one who's updating the index, I don't need a strategy. I have, however, a crawler, and the crawler is used when you have to rebuild the index from scratch. Then you need a crawler to crawl through all the users and then add them to the index. So that's how that is set up. And because of the events, the code starts here. So for each event, I have a function that is called when the event is called. I will start with the onUser created. When a user is created, what you get from the events is just the username. So what we need, I need a repository where I can push my Solr user into it. And I need a factory where I can convert my user from the Sitecore membership user thingy into an object that can be pushed into Solr. So inside my Solr forum user, I have a create that can create a Solr indexable forum user. I can show you how that looks. So this is my indexable user where I have some fields that will be pushed into Solr. You can see I have an ID, and I replace my backslashes, my extranet backslashes, with nothing, because the backslashes is a tokenizer in Solr. So if I don't use that, I'm not able of getting one specific user from my index. And apart from that, I just store a username, a consumer ID, that's an external ID to an external system. I have the email. This is the address. An address in Denmark can be told in you know, the full address, but you also have a code for an address. So we just store the address code. I have some first names, some last names. And from that, I simply create that user into a Solr indexable forum user. I just take the properties, my custom properties from my user profile, and I push them into that, that object. And from that, I can just add the user to the Solar index, but adding a user is done just like Sitecore would add something to the Solar index. We actually start a job, and the job would look like this. First, I will check if the user exists already, and if he exists already, I won't add him because this is an add operation. And apart from that, I just make an update context that is out of the box, and I add my operation and I commit the user. The same goes for a delete event, and you have to remember that every time a user is deleted in Sitecore, you also need to delete it from the index, otherwise you will not be GDPR compliant. So for the delete event, all you get is, again, just a username, and you do pretty much the same, that you go into and make an object and say this object contains a username that I want to delete, and then I delete the user. Updating is done by deleting the user and re-adding the user. And everything is done by using just the Sitecore job manager. So with fairly limited amount of code, I have suddenly been able to make an index where I have all my users. And with that index, I can create this customer support website. And with that customer support website, they are capable of doing simple searches on email or an address or whatever we have, and very, very quickly find the user. So this is how I find myself. It is extremely fast. If I didn't have this solution, it wouldn't be possible to search for myself. There's a little bit drawback of using an index, because the rebuild time of this index with about 1 million users inside is about 5 hours. And that's because getting users from the .NET membership database is still a slow process. The code can be optimized. I think I could lower the time until 4 hours perhaps, but it will still be slow, and the index will have a downtime on some minutes within those 4 or 5 hours it takes to rebuild the index. So that's it for me, and we have plenty of time for questions or comments if you have any.
How often did you rebuild the index for users?
I never rebuilt the index for the users. I only did it once, and you all know it's a lie, because obviously there were some mistakes in the code that required me to rebuild the index, but it's only because I have a code error that I need to rebuild the index.
Perfect, because you're basically talking about all the problems we have with that. Whilst you were testing these solutions, did you kind of push way beyond the million users to see how far you could go?
No, I've tested it until 2 million users, but not 3 million users. So that's what we have. It doesn't seem that the .NET membership provider slows down for just getting a user and logging them in. It doesn't matter how many users you have. It's just a select statement into a database, so that's fast. The Solar index, I assume, will have millions of users with no problem. So I don't think it will be a problem with 3 million users.
Can you recommend any membership provider outside of standard membership provider and Active Directory, any adequate alternative?
No.
You could answer.
I know that Sitecore is working on probably replacing .NET membership provider with the .NET identity provider. If that happens, we don't exactly know, but I think that will happen. But it's not a given. It's not a given that it will be a complete replacement. Maybe it's a provider where you can choose between them. The reason why the membership provider is being obsoleted is because Sitecore doesn't support it anymore. They haven't done that for about 7 years. So in time, this will be replaced with something else. But for the moment, we are stuck with Sitecore, with the membership provider. Sorry, yes, Microsoft doesn't support .NET membership provider anymore.
You don't have federated authentication, so you can use it like right in the middle.
Yeah, one of the issues with replacing it is if you have 1 million users and you replace it with a different provider, you probably have to ask all users for their password again. So they have to re-enter their password. And that is, I think, one of the big challenges of changing a provider like this. That because the password doesn't exist, it's just a hash key somewhere.
Yeah, in Sitecore you cannot serialize and deserialize users during the password. The bare minimum you can do is just deserialize with some default password, like B or whatever is set up.
Exactly.
That's a challenge.
More questions? I do actually have a question. Did you try to use the switch on rebuild provider?
No.
For the index?
No.
It should work, I guess.
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Other questions?
There was no need to do it because we didn't rebuild it at all.
Yeah, that's true. Or if that was completely truthful. Yeah, but even just to keep the index updated would be nice to have. Yeah.
Zero downtime anyway.
Yeah. Well.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.